Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Vikings Season 4, Episode 10, The Last Ship. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Vikings. I don't look at it from a historical perspective. I'm just a guy watching a scripted, narrative-based TV show telling you what I think about it. So I'll have to give a spoiler warning for Vikings up to Season 4, Episode 10. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So, Vikings has followed a different format this year as they decided to, instead of the normal 10 episodes per season, to double the size to 20 episodes, but split the season in two. So this episode was the mid-season finale, and it looks like that the second half of the season will probably come back sometime between September and November. And they have already committed to the same format for Season 5 as well. And as far as the mid-season finales go, I thought that this was a really good one. So apparently there was a lot of people upset over the time jump in the second half of the episode, but I'm not one of them. In fact, I quite liked it. But I'll get more into that later. Suffice to say that overall I really enjoyed this episode and thought it was a great way to wrap off the first half of the season and makes me really look forward to the second half. So typically I divide my review by location. However, there were only two locations in this episode of consequence, and they're related, so I'll more go in chronological order. So the episode begins right where we left off with King Ragnar leading a large fleet of ships towards Paris, and they encounter Paris's own fleet of ships coming to meet them. So apparently Ragnar had Floki build these large barges, as we saw in the previous episodes, so they could engage in hand-to-hand combat on the river. The thought being that the Vikings have the advantage in that style of combat. However, I was kind of left to wonder if Ragnar's trick of carrying the boats over the mountain was really worth it, as Paris was able to meet them with a large fleet before they even got to the city. But I suppose had they gone the same way up the river, they would have stood less of a chance because the Paris forces had guard towers and chains and whatnot, and this way they probably didn't have as much time to prepare and had to put together a makeshift fleet. But Rollo, knowing their tactics, they was still able to beat them back. But I'm sure the Vikings did a lot more damage than they would have had they came from the other side. Still, all the months they spent carrying their boats over all of these, with wacky contraptions and everything, seemed like a waste of time. So, back in Paris, we get a scene with the Emperor having dinner with Count Roland and his sister, and they try to badmouth Rollo, but the Emperor sticks up for him, and they get so pissed they even go as far to call him stupid. So he then has them both killed. Now, I don't mean to suggest that this was a spur-of-the-moment decision, as obviously he had planned this all along. I'm not entirely clear on what exactly went on here. I'm not sure when he decided to kill them or why. Was it his plan all along to kill them, or did he realize they were attempting to play him? Did his daughter and Rollo have something to do with it, because she was the one who really didn't trust him? Did she come to her father about it, or did he realize it all on his own? And why did the Emperor sleep with Roland? Was he just trolling him because he knew he was trying to get his sister to seduce him, so he asked to sleep with him instead? But it seems like, that just like they did, I underestimated the Emperor, as I was saying how stupid he was for trusting these two, but it turns out he isn't so stupid after all. But part of me thinks that doing this makes him a bit ungrateful, as they were the ones who saved him from Count Odo's plotting, and she endured a lot of torture in order to save the Emperor. But ultimately, they didn't do it for him, they did it for their own ambitions, and they would turn on the Emperor just as soon as they did on Odo to suit their own needs. And apparently, the Emperor was wise enough to see this, and wise enough to see that his true ally is Rollo. So back on the battlefield, the forces of Paris suffer a lot of losses, and so one of Rollo's lieutenants suggests that they retreat, to which Rollo replies by killing him. Pretty brutal. I almost wondered if his men would turn on him because of this, but he gives this inspirational speech, and so they follow him. It was such a great speech. Too bad only like 20 people heard it, because I doubt anyone on any of the other boats would hear it. But oh well. So they charge towards the Vikings and engage them again on their barges, and we get the battle sequence where we follow all our main characters as they each begin to lose. As the Finehair brothers takes an arrow on the shoulder, Floki gets stabbed in the side, Lagatha takes a sword in the shoulder. We also get the epic fight between Ragnar and Rollo as they build up, with these two of them saying one of them will not survive. However, one of the drawbacks of knowing a bit about history that this is based on, I knew that wouldn't be the case, that they would both survive. But then again, the show is so loosely based on history, they could always change that, but I didn't think that they would, and they didn't. So I found the whole epic battle between Ragnar and Rollo tad bit of a letdown, but then again, they did both beat the ever-loving shit out of each other, and even if Ragnar did survive, the overall takeaway was that Rollo was victorious. So interlaced with the fighting was some religious imagery, with the seer crying or screaming in agony or whatever he was doing, and the statue that Princess Gisla was praying to appeared to be weeping. As I said, I'm not a fan of the supernatural or religious imagery, so I could have done without this. It was a tad bit hokey for me, but I think ultimately it was just meant to signify that the Vikings would be defeated. But overall, I want to say about the entire battle sequence as a whole, it was really impressive and one of the better ones that the show has ever done. It was really interesting that they had the entire battle take place on the river. So then we see Rollo return to Paris, where he was celebrated as a war hero. You see people on the streets hugging and praising him. Everyone's cheering. Then after his wife gives him a really heartfelt kiss, the emperor kisses him on both cheeks and praises him in front of the crowd and proclaims, "God bless Paris," to which everyone just loses their minds. This was a great scene. I loved the way it played out, but I think its main purpose was to make absolutely clear that Rollo is one of them now. Not just one of them, but actually one of their big heroes. So he truly is Frankish now and not a Viking, and all those who doubted him are dead, so he's completely made his choice now. He is one of them. Then we see the Vikings rowing back home, licking their wounds. They all seem pretty defeated. Ragnar looks like absolute shite. So I'm sure this will go down as one of the biggest defeats for him. None of them have sort of the will to keep fighting. So next, we get the controversial time jump. And so I have to say that I actually really liked it. Feel of it as you will, but I'll be just completely honest with how I think, and I actually think it worked. I have to, I've said it before that I typically don't like large sudden time jumps. I didn't like it when shows like Battlestar Galactica or Lost did it. However, I stated I thought Vikings was the one show that can actually pull these off well. As I was also a huge fan of the time jump that they did in the season 2, as we suddenly saw Bjorn as a grown man rather than a small boy, and I felt that made the story so much more interesting. I also think the time jump really worked here as well. I know that there were many details, such as how would Bjorn react to the news that his daughter was dead, and other little details like that. But frankly, I don't think those details are that important. Anything that has any real importance, such as what happened to Lagatha after the battle, I'm sure we'll find out in time. It just makes sense to me that if nothing important happened in this time, that they just skip over it. Maybe it's because I think this show has a tendency to move a bit slower than I want. That I find that the fact that they're skipping over all these potentially slow filler scenes, this actually makes me really happy. And it makes sense if Ragnar had disappeared all this time, that they would just skip to his return. And much in the same way the season 2 time jump allowed Bjorn to instantly age into a man, making him a main character, this time jump also allows Ragnar's other sons to age. And based on what I know about history, it seems that Ivar in particular will become quite an important character to the show, so I'm actually glad that they cut straight to that. And in fact, I'm just happy that these kids are actually, they aged them up all of a sudden, because I think it would just make things so much more interesting. The other complaint is perhaps they should have saved this time jump to the second half of the season and had the battle in Paris take up the entire episode. But generally speaking, I'm a huge fan of epilogues, of stories that explore the aftermath of the main story rather than simply ending abruptly. So I actually really like seeing the aftermath of losing the Battle of Paris and what this did to Ragnar. And personally, I think the Battle in Paris was perfect length the way it is, and I'd much rather get this epilogue in this episode rather than drag it out any longer where it may not have been as effective. However, the main reason I probably like this time jump so much is that they jumped right to the one scene I've been waiting 2 years for. The Paris storyline is all well and good, and seeing Aslog screw around with Hubbard, that's a waste of time. The one storyline I've been most invested in is the England storyline, and I've been waiting all this time for the Viking storyline to intersect with that storyline again, and we finally got that when Bjorn and the others finally find out that the settlement in Wessex was wiped out almost as soon as they left, and that Ragnar has been hiding this from them. And they find out that Ragnar fathered a child by Queen Quinthrith, which is being raised in Wessex. Now, I speculated before that this might not be Ragnar's child, that she might be lying, but I no longer think that that's the case. Apparently, I forgot about the scene where they actually did show them having sex, and at this stage, she's no longer alive, so if she was lying, no one else would really know, so even if she was, it doesn't really matter. For all intents and purposes, he is Ragnar's son. So it will be interesting how this plays out as well. Anyway, I like this scene where the visitor was telling Bjorn about this, and Aslog seemed beside herself with joy. She just hates Ragnar so much. She loves any news that portrays him in a negative light. So then Bjorn goes out to break the news to his brothers, so we get to see Ragnar's sons now that they're all grown up as teenagers, and how they all want to kill Ragnar upon hearing this. That is, except for Ivar, who sticks up for him and proclaims it's not because of love, it's because he admires the man that he is, which I think is a really interesting concept. But what I really liked most about the scene is what Bjorn says about how people treated Ragnar as if he was a god, but he's not. He's just a man. And that's what I think the main point of the entire season thus far has been. Because in the first 3 seasons, Ragnar was portrayed as an unstoppable genius, capable of anything. But this episode drove home that he's just a man. And it's also great to hear Bjorn say it. He's just a man, just as flawed as any other, but despite that, he's still the greatest man in the world to him. Then we see Bjorn approach Floki about the news, and Floki tells him he knows about, that the settlement in Wessex was wiped out, that he was there when a farmer told Ragnar about it, and then Ragnar killed him. Now, it's been a while since I've seen season 3. I don't remember it very clearly, and sometimes I recall some information from it wrong, but I don't remember Floki being there. So is he lying? Because I remember thinking to myself, if Floki finds out that he would be the main one who wants to attack Wessex. So let me know in the comment section if he's lying or not, because I can't remember that very well. So the other important piece of information we get from this scene is that Floki is building a fleet of ships so Bjorn can travel to the Mediterranean Sea, which at this stage, he doubts even exists, and he just calls it scribblings on a map, but they are resolved to go anyway. And I just love the scene, the music, and everything with Bjorn and Floki's resolve to go on another adventure. It just drives home that Bjorn has truly succeeded his father, and this is a storyline I cannot wait to see. So finally, we get to the final scene where Ragnar returns home and everyone except for Ivar seems pissed at him, and he can tell, so he gives a fiery speech about how he's a failure and they might as well kill him. Of course, the purpose of the speech is kind of to show that he's not a man who can just simply be killed. But this whole speech was absolutely awesome and the perfect way to end this mid-season. So my rating for The Last Ship out of 10 is a 10, the best. In my opinion, this is one of the best episodes of Vikings, from its awesome battle sequences to its perfect setup for the rest of the season to come. I love how it concluded the season 4 storyline of Ragnar's downfall, where we get the main message that he's just a man, while at the same time setting up so many storylines that quite frankly sound far more interesting to me than what we've seen so far in these past couple of seasons, such as the Vikings returning to being involved in the affairs of England, to Bjorn sailing to the Mediterranean Sea. I simply cannot wait for these. So that's it for my review of The Last Ship. I decided I won't be doing an overall review for the first half of Season 4, and instead we'll wait until all of Season 4 has concluded and look back on it as a whole. I will say, however, that so far I am liking Season 4 much better than Season 3, and I would say that the show has improved a lot this year. However, you can check out my channel for many more videos on many more shows. Be sure to check out my Game of Thrones Season 6 coverage, which starts in just a few days, as I'll be doing weekly episode reviews as well as weekly discussion videos with Atkin Tomko. And also be sure to check out my channel for videos on more shows like Star Trek, Fear the Walking Dead, Orphan Black, and more. And be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.